In the 90s, at a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting, a young guy stood up and asked Charlie Munger for his best advice on getting rich. Munger didn't give him a stock tip. He said the first $100,000 is a bitch, but you have to do it. Walk everywhere. Stop buying anything that didn't come with a coupon, whatever it takes. Get your hands on that 100 grand. After that, he said, you can ease off the gas a little. He was in his 70s when he said it, decades into being one of the richest men alive. And that's still the answer he gave. Not a fund, not a formula, not a stock. Just the blunt truth that the beginning is the roughest part, and there's no version of getting rich that skips it. Here's the part he didn't put a number on, so I did. Save $700 a month at a normal market return, and that first $100,000 takes almost 9 years. The second $100,000, same $700, same everything, shows up in a little over 5. Same money, same person, nearly 4 fewer years for a bigger jump. So today we're breaking down why the first stretch drags like that, what actually flips around 100,000, and the exact number you personally need to be saving to get there, based on what you actually make. Grab your wine. This one's got math in it, but I promise it's the useful kind. Let's start with your actual first milestone, not Munger's. Your first $10,000, at $700 a month, you get there in about 14 months. And here's the detail that surprised me when I actually ran the numbers. Of that $10,000, $9,800 is money you personally put in. The market only chipped in about $380. So if your first $10,000 felt like it was entirely, exhaustingly you, that's because it was. There's no snowball yet. There's just you, showing up every single month, funding the whole thing out of your own paycheck, while the market does basically nothing for you. That's not a math problem. That's a willpower problem, and it's the hardest kind, because nobody hands out a trophy for month 7. And this is exactly the stretch where people quit. Not because they're lazy, but because the feedback is genuinely terrible. You're doing the same disciplined thing in month 12 that you did in month 1, and the account barely looks different for it. Compare that to literally any other goal you've chased. Go to the gym for a year, and your body visibly changes. Study for a year, and you can feel yourself getting sharper. Save $700 a month for a year, and the account just goes up by roughly the amount you put in, plus pocket change. The effort is constant. The visible reward lags for a long time behind it. That gap is exactly where people talk themselves out of continuing, right before the part where the math finally starts paying them back. Now, fast forward to the $100,000 mark. Same $700 a month, same market. By the time you cross it, you've personally deposited about $73,500. The other $26,500 came from growth. Roughly a quarter of your first $100K was the market working, not you. I mean, sit with that for a second. Somewhere between your first $10,000 and your first $100,000, the ratio quietly flips from almost entirely you to about 3/4 you. Nobody announces it. There's no push notification that says, congratulations. The market just started doing more of the lifting. It just slowly becomes true while you're busy living your life and forgetting to check the account. And that's really the whole secret to why the first stretch feels endless. It's not that the math is against you early on. It's that the math hasn't shown up yet. You're doing 100% of the work for a return that's barely doing anything back, which, by the way, is exactly the setup that makes people quit, right before the part where it gets easier. And that impatience has spawned an entire industry built to sell you a shortcut around it. This week's villain isn't one guy, it's an entire genre. The girl selling a $97 course on manifesting abundance through a vision board, and, weirdly, also a payment plan. The crypto account that's always 72 hours away from the coin that changes your life. And the aesthetic is always the same. A rented sports car, a hotel infinity pool that isn't the one attached to their room, and a caption about generational wealth underneath a screenshot that's conveniently missing the losing trades from the week before. Nobody posts the account down 40%. That screenshot just quietly disappears until the next win comes along to post instead. Here's what they're actually selling. Not a strategy. A way to skip the part of the timeline where you're the only one doing the work. Because that part, the 14 months of packed lunches and the 14 months after that and the 14 after that, is boring. And boring doesn't get clicks. So the grift reframes the slowest, most reliable path to money as the loser's path, and reframes gambling as the smart one. And look, if their system actually printed money reliably, they would not be selling it to you for the price of a nice dinner. They'd be quietly running it themselves. The course fee is the tell. It's always the tell. My personal flavor of this, back in my 20s, wasn't crypto. It was a wealth mindset coach who charged me $400 to tell me that money was a form of energy I needed to align with. I aligned with it so hard, I had 400 fewer dollars and zero new information about compound interest. That's not a strategy. That's a horoscope with a payment plan. What actually makes the overnight money grift so dangerous isn't that it fails. It's that it fails quietly, and it costs you the one thing you can't refund, which is time inside the compounding window. Every month you spend chasing the shortcut is a month you weren't funding the boring account that was actually going to get there. The villain doesn't steal your $100,000 directly. It steals the 14 months and then the next 14, until you're starting your real first 10,000 5 years later than you needed to. So here's the actual antidote, and it's deeply unsexy. Automate the boring number, ignore the guy with the Lambo thumbnail, and let time do what time does. Speaking of the actual number, let's get specific. Because save more is useless advice unless it comes with a figure attached to your real income. If nobody's ever handed you real numbers instead of vague advice, hit subscribe. Every week, I break down one more piece of the money math they somehow forgot to teach us. Okay, let's get into your actual number. Here's the assumption we're working from. A savings rate of 15% of your gross income, which is the benchmark most retirement planners land on, and a market return of about 7% a year, which is roughly what the broad U.S. stock market has averaged over long stretches. Different starting point. Same math underneath. Make $50,000 a year. 15% of that is about $625 a month. At that pace, your first $100,000 takes around 9.5 years. Make $75,000. That's roughly $938 a month. And your first $100,000 arrives in about 7 years. Make $100,000. 15% is $1,250 a month, and you're looking at around 5.5 years to the same milestone. Make $150,000? That's about $1,875 a month, and your first $100,000 shows up in under 4 years. And if you're single income, renting, or supporting anyone besides yourself, 15% might sound like a number written for someone else's life. It's a benchmark, not a rule. And the gap between where you are and 15% doesn't need closing overnight. A single earner covering rent alone in an expensive city is doing genuinely different math than a dual-income household splitting the same bills. And the number should reflect your actual situation, not a spreadsheet built for a hypothetical version of you. Notice what actually moved across all 4 of those. It wasn't the return. 7% stayed 7% the entire time. It was purely how much of your own income you routed into the account every single month before you had the chance to spend it on something else. The market's contribution is basically fixed. Your contribution is the only lever you actually control, which is either the most empowering sentence in this video or the most annoying one, depending on your mood tonight. And if 15% feels out of reach right now, the math still works at 10, it just takes longer, and it still works at 20, and it gets there faster. At a $70,000 income, 10% saved gets you to your first 100,000 in about 10 years. 20% gets you there in under 6. The percentage isn't a moral test. It's a dial, and you're allowed to turn it wherever your actual life allows this year and turn it further next year. Whatever your number ends up being, here's why hitting that first 100,000 mark specifically matters more than the number itself would suggest. Munger could have picked any number, 50,000, 200,000, whatever. He picked 100,000 for a reason, and it's not just that it's a round number that sounds nice in a shareholder meeting. Remember the ratio from earlier. Your first 10,000 was 96% you. Your first 100,000 was 73% you. Now, look at what happens on the way to 200,000. Of that second $100,000, the same $700 a month only accounts for about 45% of it. The other 55%, more than half, comes from the market. For the first time since you started, growth is doing more work than you are. That's the actual flip Munger was pointing at when he said, you could ease off the gas. Not that you stop contributing, you shouldn't, but that the account stops needing you to be its primary engine. Before 100,000, if you missed a few months of contributions, your balance basically stalled because you were the balance. After it, the account has enough mass to keep growing meaningfully even during a rough month, because the money already in there is finally big enough to generate real money on its own. There's a psychological version of this too, and it's just as real as the math. $100,000 is the first number that stops sounding like savings and starts sounding like a position. It's the difference between I have some money put away and I have $100,000 invested, which is a sentence that changes how you make every decision after it. People negotiate harder. They take the slightly riskier job. They stop panicking over a $400 car repair because $400 against $100,000 just isn't the same emergency it used to be. I noticed it in myself before I noticed it in the account. Somewhere past that mark, I stopped white-knuckling every grocery bill and started actually looking at the total instead of just the monthly deposit. That shift is worth almost as much as the money is. There's actual research behind why round, six-figure numbers hit differently. And it's the same reason a price tag of $9.99 feels cheaper than $10, even though your brain knows better. We process numbers by their leftmost digit first. $100,001 registers as 6 figures, instantly, before you've done a single calculation. Crossing that threshold doesn't just add $1 to your balance. It moves you into an entirely different mental category, and your brain treats those categories very differently, even when the actual gap between them is one single dollar. So, let's close the loop on the number from the hook. 9 years for the first 100,000, 5 years and change for the second, same monthly deposit both times. Here's the mechanical reason, not the vibes reason. Compound growth is calculated on your whole balance, not just your new deposits. At $10,000, 7% growth for a year is about $700, roughly 1 month's contribution. At $100,000, that same 7% is $7,000. 10 months of contributions generated without you lifting a finger. At $200,000, it's $14,000, doing the equivalent of 20 months of your own deposits in a single year. Your contribution stayed exactly the same the whole time. $700 a month, every month. No raises assumed, no lump sums, no lucky trade. What changed was the size of the thing the return was being calculated on. That's the entire mechanism behind Munger's advice. And it's why he told that guy to grind for the first 100,000 specifically, instead of just saying invest early, which is the kind of vague advice that looks true and helps nobody. And this is also why people who inherit or windfall into $100,000, instead of grinding for it, often watch it grow even faster from there. It's not because their money is special. It's because they skipped the 14-month, then 9-year climb where the balance was too small to generate real growth and started the clock already at the size where compounding has something to work with. Which sounds unfair, because it kind of is. But it also means the exact same acceleration is waiting for you the moment your own balance gets there. The mechanism doesn't check how the money arrived. None of this requires you to get lucky or get smart about picking stocks. Maya, who I've talked about on this channel before, never named a single stock she owned. She bought one boring index fund and left it alone for 3.5 decades. The acceleration isn't a reward for skill, it's a reward for size. And size is just contributions plus patience, stacked long enough for the math to notice, which means the actual, unglamorous conclusion of a whole video about a famous quote is this: the first 100,000 doesn't feel hard because you're doing something wrong. It feels hard because you're doing the one part of this that has no shortcut. And once it's done, you genuinely never have to do that particular kind of hard again. So, back to Munger and that guy at the shareholder meeting. Walk everywhere. Skip anything without a coupon. Whatever it takes, get to $100,000. It sounds almost mean when you first hear it. It's actually the kindest advice in this entire video, because he's telling you the hard part has an end date. It's not forever. It's roughly 9 years at $700 a month, less if you can push the number higher, and then the account starts pulling its own weight. If you're 2 years into your first 10,000 and it feels like nothing is happening, nothing is supposed to be happening yet, 96% of that balance is still just you, showing up, and that's not a sign you're behind. That's the actual shape of the beginning. Every single account that's ever crossed $100,000 looked exactly like yours does right now at some point. The habit is the part that outlasts every number we talked about tonight. $700, automated, ignored, repeated for years, is worth infinitely more than a better strategy you never actually stuck with. The deposit habit is what survives market crashes, career changes, and every next big thing that tries to talk you out of it along the way. And whatever your number turns out to be, 50 a month or 500 or 1,500, the timeline math works exactly the same way at every size. The first stretch is the one that asks the most of you for the least visible reward. It's also the only stretch you only ever have to do once. If you're in the grind part right now, the part with no snowball yet, keep going. It ends sooner than it feels like it will. And if you want the next piece of math nobody handed you, subscribe. I'll be here, same table, same wine, working through the rest of it with you.